What's up, guys? I need to show you this game because the way that it ended was incredible. And the interesting thing is a lot of times when you have opposite color bishops, the game is going to be a draw. So when I say opposite color bishops, I mean my bishop is on the light squares. My opponent's bishop is on the dark squares. And what that means is my bishop can never stop what black's bishop is trying to do, and vice versa. The bishops are always going to be able to just kind of do their own thing. And because of that, it's very difficult to actually win the game because you can kind of just blockade the squares of that color and it's hard to break through. But I want to illustrate an interesting thing that happened in this game. And if you are going to try to win a game with opposite color bishops, there's a couple things you need to keep in mind. So let's go ahead and take a look at the game, and then we're going to primarily focus on this position right here. So let's jump back to the beginning here. All right, so we played. I'm going to turn off the feedback here. So it was a French defense, and sometimes when I play the French, I'm just annoyed. And I'm like, okay, no. I'm not playing the French mainline, E4, D4 stuff, because I don't know it that well. And I don't like playing positions where my opponent knows more than I do. So what I like to do sometimes is just play some random moves that maybe they're not good, but they're probably not anything that's been played before, like fianchettoing here, castling, fianchettoing over here. I don't think this has probably been played before. So I feel like I've successfully kind of avoided the opening preparation of my opponent. Okay, so here we go. The game goes on. Not really much happening here. Okay, it's pretty boring. We're just kind of bouncing our pieces around. Okay, we get a trade. And I thought maybe I could take advantage of some of these weak pawns over here. So I played queen to a5. My opponent did trade to save these guys. Now I have a little tactic here. If I can take this and the rook takes, then I'll be able to win the knight. But my opponent saw that, played knight to b4, and they're basically defending the pawn that way. Okay, so I'm trying to, first of all, I have to defend this. But then after that, I'm trying to get rid of the knight, because once I take the knight, the pawn on c6 is undefended. Okay, but my opponent deals with that threat by adding another defender. And again, very equal position, not much happening here. I decided to go ahead and give that up just because I felt like the knight was kind of annoying. I wanted to be able to use my rook, and my bishop wasn't doing a whole lot over there. So I decided to trade. The downside of that is that it did fix black's pawn structure, but I felt like, okay, it's, fine. And now we get this position. And I tried to do some, tricks here with my knight. My opponent was defending very well, couldn't really do much. I noticed that this could be a target. Now, the same thing could be said about my pawn for black. My pawn could be a target, this could be a target. So we may end up with just a pawn trade. If let's just say I go here, my opponent goes here, I take this, they take that, right? That's just something to keep in mind. And that's kind of what was happening here. Okay, rook to e8. So here's the position. If I trade these rooks, there's probably no way in the world that I'm going to win this game. So for example, takes. Yes, I can go get the pawn, but like I mentioned, black's going to get my pawn. We're going to get a trade. And notice how I can never touch any of black's pawns. My bishop can't do anything. Same thing, black can't really touch any of my pawns. Nobody's going to be able to do anything, okay? So the first step to not getting a draw in my mind was I need to keep the rooks on the board. So I played bishop e4 to stop the trade, okay? Second step was to try to come over here and actually threaten to win a pawn. Because if I can, let's just say win this pawn, move my bishop out of the way and start pushing this guy, that could be pretty difficult for black to stop, especially with the support of the rook. Okay. However, my opponents did a pretty good job of defending that. I just brought the rook up to the 6th rank, so I can't do that. And so I put my bishop in the center. And if you look at this position, even though we have the opposite color bishops, my bishop is clearly better than black's bishop, right? Look at this, it's very well defended. Black doesn't really have a nice outpost for their bishop. However, it's still an opposite colored bishop endgame, and it still looks very boring and dull and drawish. But watch what happens. My opponent decides to put their pawns on the same color squares as my bishop. Apologize for the loud noise. People are driving outside. They put their pawns on the same color as my bishop, and I decided to lock them in that way by putting my pawns on the opposite color. Now, what this does is gives me targets, right? Because my bishop can actually attack those pawns. If you compare that to over here on this side of the board, notice how all the pawns are on the opposite color of my bishop. I can't attack these. So this was like, okay, maybe there is some glimmer of hope here for me. And then the other thing that happened here is I was able to get my rook to the file. Now, some of you are probably noticing that this pawn over here on a5 is now undefended, so it was a little bit of a risk because I had to sacrifice that pawn, which is then going to allow black to potentially start pushing a passed pawn. But I want to illustrate something here, guys. Opposite color bishops, even though they are drawish, are very good at attacking your opponent's king. And it has to do with the fact that whatever my bishop is controlling, this bishop is not controlling. Okay, so watch what I'm talking about here. So black grabs the pawn, but now I invade with my rook. And now black has to be careful. And they kind of start slipping up here. Rook to f8 check. Now black has a tough decision. Do they come over here and allow me to go check like this, forcing the king further back to the back rank? And then maybe I can come over here and think about things like this. Because if I can get all three of these pawns, then it's a different story. Now 3 pawns can actually very easily win, right? So black has to be careful. And they decided to, instead of go that way, to go this way. King to g7. But watch what happens now. Rook to f7 check. And again, they have to make a tough decision. Do they go to the back rank? You don't want to go here and walk into the discover check. So do you go in a corner or do you go here? This is what my opponent decided to do. And now I think I found a pretty nice idea. If you would like to pause, what could be a potential plan here for white to try to win this game? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move that I played was rook to b7. And it might look like I'm attacking the bishop, but really I'm not. Really what I'm doing is clearing this diagonal because I want to bring my bishop back here and checkmate the black king. Notice how black has basically run themselves into what's called a mating net. They're trapped. They can't get out. And it's very difficult to stop this because, like I mentioned, this bishop can't really stop what I'm trying to do along these light squares, right? If it was a knight, that would be a different story. You could position it somewhere to defend those squares. This bishop can't. So black plays a5, which they didn't have time to. Apparently, the engine says you can still get out of this if you play bishop to d8. And I'm not exactly sure what the idea is there. But after a5, the game is over. If you would like to pause, how do I follow up? Well, this one's pretty straightforward. I already kind of told you. Bishop to g8, threatening checkmate. And now black has to play this move to not get checkmated. However, there is a follow-up here for me. White to play and win. What did I play next? If you had a chance to look at that, I simply captured the pawn, and when the king moved over, bishop to h7. Look at this checkmate. This is absolutely incredible. But it just goes to show the power of the opposite colored bishop attack. Even just a bishop and a rook and a pawn positioned in just the right way can create a mating net. And ultimately, we see the checkmate here. Fascinating stuff. And so I wanted to illustrate, the dangers of opposite colored bishops if you allow your opponent to attack your king. All right. So keep that in mind, guys. Hopefully you learned something here, and just be careful at the end with opposite colored bishops. See you next time. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.